She goes, wow. Then she goes, wow. Just every 5, just fucking, it's just, I can do that too. If I had infinite stamina, I would do that too. I would just swing forever.
Side, side, across, across. Side, side, across, across. So it's like 4 or 5 hits for that.
It just keeps going and going and going and going.
Welcome back everyone. In the last video, 15 of our favorite streamers faced off against the dancing lion in Shadow of the Erdtree, and these were their respective performances. A little more than 500 deaths in total. Today, we are going to see how they performed against Rellana, the twin Moon Knight. Is she gonna kill them more than the lion? Let's find out. So, in case you're not familiar with the analysis process, here's how it's gonna go. We're going to take a look at each streamer's build and then check how many times they died to the boss. On top of that, we're gonna write down each attack that defeated them and how much health the boss had when they died. This will allow us to draw their performance graph, with each bar representing one attempt. At the end of the study, we'll be able to rank their performances as well as see which attacks were the most troublesome for each of them. Without further ado, let's take a look at the boss. Rellana's moves were harder to categorize than the lion's, mainly because she can cancel or extend most of her combos into other combos. Or in other words,
she did a double combo with the dash. She sword, dash, and then went into this.
I still did my best to list her moves, and they are as follows. I named the most common one the side slash combo. That's when she dashes to the left or right and slashes with both of her swords. Since this ends with one of her swords raised, she can extend the combo or transition into another move I called the 3-step cross slash, that has her swinging each sword individually and then both at once. Another example would be the side stab, which is similar but ends with a thrust attack. That can transition into a stab combo, a retreating slash, or a stab double spin. There's also the 2-step cross slash, the double slash, and the slash spin. For some more easily recognizable attacks, we got the high phalanx that spawns swords and the low phalanx lunge, where the swords are in front of her and she dashes. A pretty damaging move would be the heavy swings, particularly brutal because the second half often catches panic rolls. Another would be the spin combo, during which she will first get ready and then lunge at the player while spinning relentlessly. Then you have Kayan Sovereignty and the occasional Moon Arcs. Once she gets to around 50% of her health left, she will transition into phase 2, empowering all of her previous moves while acquiring new ones. After the transition, she will often open with one of 2 moves, either the Moon Arc spam if you're far away, or the Firestorm if you're close. She also gains access to the cross spin combo, the side spin, and finally, one of the coolest attacks in the entire DLC, Rellana's Twin Moons. This is the one that makes people make this face when she does it for the first time. So now that we are experts at recognizing what she does, let's look at our streamers. Last time we started with Lyric and Emiru as they had the most average number of deaths. So let's do that again this time, starting with Emiru. She was level 169 with 4 Scattertree Blessings and wielding Milady. Emiru actually did really well against this boss pretty early on in her attempts. She quickly realized that Rellana would keep extending her combos if she stayed close, and so she tried to keep her distance, waiting for an opportunity to dash in using the impaling thrust Ash of War to damage the boss. This meant she could sometimes get a few staggers when she was aggressive enough. The stab double spin was the attack that killed her the most, probably due to the truckload of damage it deals in second phase. She ended up dying 54 times, with nearly half of those deaths in phase 2.
Yippee! I did it! Oh. Man, I just kept f***ing stabbing her and shit.
Lyric is next, and I must apologize since I was informed that he also played through the DLC in New Game Plus, meaning that just like Point Crow, his bosses deal and mitigate more damage. Let's see if that is reflected in his performance. Lyric was level 174 with 4 blessings and using a Godslayer Greatsword. He actually attempted the boss about 50 times with a more defensive build before losing it completely, removing his shield, going naked and switching to a 2-handed weapon.
I don't want to use my final form, but you've left me no choice.
He died a total of 68 times, and you can actually see the moment he started going naked in his graph as it suddenly spikes upwards. He died to the 3-step cross slash the most, especially after removing his gear, as it would one-shot him when transitioned into after the side slash. Just like Emiru, he also had about half of his deaths in phase 2, and you'll see why this stat is important later.
Oh! Oof! God damn! First try, boys. I'm not surprised.
Now that we got some average performances to be able to compare, let's look at some people who died less than 10 times to the boss. Distortion 2, Shroud, and Asmongold. Dist went in at level 206 with 6 blessings and wielding a fully upgraded, blood-infused Bloodfiend's arm. Now, Dist admitted that he had seen this boss beforehand, which meant he probably knew her moves already and didn't have the pressure of needing to learn the boss instead of smashing it with a really strong build.
I may have known how to dodge that attack already.
And so he used the Bloodfiend's arm, and there is a reason this weapon got nerfed, as at the time he was using it, it had 218 blood loss buildup per hit. That, paired with insane stagger damage on the charge R2s, meant the boss didn't really get to play the game. He only died twice, but in the third fight, everything went smoothly and the boss died in less than a minute.
This weapon is fucking busted. Oh my god. Wow.
Shroud was level 149 with 4 blessings and wielding Milady. Shroud has a pretty different mindset compared to most other streamers. He often says he's not good and patient enough to learn the bosses perfectly, and he'd rather play aggressive with a very strong build and just hope for the best.
Just like perfectly dodging everything. Oh, I could never. I don't have that level of willpower, dude. It's fucking crazy.
Just like Emiru before him, Shroud managed to space the boss efficiently and make the most out of his impaling thrust Ashfua. He was dealing very decent damage thanks to his optimal build and buff stacking. This meant that he only died 6 times, with every attempt being fairly decent.
Agreed. I told you, just a matter of one of them is gonna work. You don't need to learn the fight at all. You just throw yourself at it, you stagger it, and eventually one of them will work. Don't do this if you're trying to be good at the game.
He's very modest, but he actually plays really well on reaction, often dodging some moves that he hasn't seen before. Next up is Asmongold. He was level 175 with 4 blessings and using a golden halberd and a gargoyle halberd. His progression curve is a little bit unsteady, with some really good attempts early on before getting worse, and he seemed to be confused by it too.
I don't know why I always do this. I'll always, like, my first attempts will always be my best attempts, and then I'll just regress like crazy.
He died 9 times to the boss, but overall his damage was very high, as his build was heavily geared towards jump attacks, and he was primarily using those to hit the boss. This also meant that he was dealing a ton of stagger damage, and during his last fight, he was so aggressive that the boss transitioned into phase 2 with around 10% of its health left.
No, don't tell me.
That was a good fight.
Alright, so now that we're out of the top 3, devs are a bit more numerous, and graphs start to look different from one another. Our next 3 streamers are Miss Mika, Elias, and XQC. Let's start with Mika. She was level 153 with 0 blessings, once again, as part of her self-imposed challenge. And she was using a bunch of different weapons actually. She beat the boss with Great Stars, but she also used Milady and the backhand blades during her early attempts. Here are some wise words she would like to share with you.
You know, I think it's all about the way you look at it. Because every time I die, I don't see it as a failure per se. I see it as a chance to learn, you know?
She was actually doing rather well even before swapping to the Great Stars, but once she did, the boss stood no chance. She would stagger her really quick and deal tons of damage, even with no blessings. No blessings meant the stab double spin, for example, would deal a significant amount of damage, but after only 12 deaths, she did it.
Woo! Let's go! Alright, easy. Easy peasy.
Ally is next. He was level 150 with 5 blessings and using the Black Steel Great Hammer. And if I was ranking streamers based on how much fun they seem to be having fighting the boss, he would probably rank first.
A double moon! Gimmick deaths, dude.
His graph is interesting because he got to phase 2 in almost 90% of fights. So even if it looks like he got worse towards the end, each attempt was still pretty solid when compared to graphs where the trend line is located higher. He was overall quite consistent in his dodges, but greeded a lot trying to get a stagger or a buff in times where he could just be a little bit more passive. He died 24 times, but him getting to phase 2 all the time meant that he actually died to the cross spin combo the most, even though the attack is pretty rare.
Remembrance.
XQC had a pretty similar performance. He was level 142 with 3 blessings and using his trusty Giant Crusher. The main difference was that he wasn't as happy as Ella.
Yeah, this is really lame. That dance he does, I can't hit anything. It's over. This zone is over already.
His strategy of using his Ash of War was getting outplayed by Rellana's dashes, and so he died a lot from the side slash combo. The stab double spin was once again quite devastating, and you'll see that he tends to get a lot of kills with streamers that play quite aggressive.
The stagger in which calendar year, you piece of Where's the stagger?
In the end, he realized that he had to be more conservative and choose his openings more carefully than against the Lion. This overall strategy obviously has its flaws, and it is reflected in his graph. After dying 25 times though, the stars aligned.
You're dead, bitch ass. It's over, bitch ass. Boom! Boom!
So these were the people who did better than average. But what about the ones who did worse than that? Well, let's take a look at Ludwig, Kaisenat, 39 Death, and Point Crow. Ludwig was level 139 with 4 blessings and wielding a Dragon Hunter's Great Katana. He also added a Great Katana as a secondary weapon in his last few attempts. He encountered Rellana quite early, but thought he needed to get stronger first. So he went to fight Baal before coming back. After a few fights, he actually made an important discovery.
I really just thought if you had enough stamina, you could just roll through it all. You have to time the rolls too, that's nuts.
He often died from the stab double spin or the 3-step cross slash, for example, because he didn't respect the boss extending her combos and tried to punish too early. He didn't get to phase 2 very often, only in about 20% of fights. But remember when I mentioned that this stat was important? Well, most people that struggle a lot on the fight seem to mostly die in phase 1. I think this might be a sign that the phase 2 is well designed, as mastering phase 1 means you've done the bulk of the job already. It doesn't transform into a completely different boss, the moves just deal more damage, and there are a few new things to learn. Anyway, back to Ludwig, who beat the boss after dying 71 times.
Sit. Woo! Light work. Honestly, no, that was like so fun. I can't even like pop off on that because it was honestly like such a shit easy ass fight. Like honestly, like zero struggle whatsoever. Like.
Up next we have Kaisenat, who fought the boss at level 157 with 4 blessings and using Rivers of Blood and a blood-infused Naga Kiba. I'm not sure what it was about this boss, but it made him do some pretty weird things. Kai was the one to die to Karen's sovereignty the most, as he struggled to find the correct timing on the second swing. He also died quite a bunch to the Moon Arcs spam and the Moon Arcs, as they were actually hitting him in real life on top of in-game. He died 96 times, but somehow struggled a lot more with phase 2 because of the previously mentioned reasons. In his last fight, he had no flasks left, but dodged the attacks that usually killed him, and emerged victorious.
Yes! 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 Suck my dick!
39 Daff was level 158 with 6 blessings and using Milady. Just like Ludwig, she encountered Rellana quite early, but came back later. Hence the unusually high amount of blessings compared to other streamers here. The first time the boss got to phase 2, she got some Dark Souls 3 flashbacks.
Whoa! Wow! Like that guy! Yeah, Pontiff Sylvain or something.
The most devastating attacks were once again the 3-step car slash and the stab double spin because of how often the boss extends her combos using those. But she also died quite a lot to the heavy swings because she would panic roll after getting hit by the first one. What's really impressive is that she only got to second phase in about 8% of fights, the lowest out of the 15 streamers. She struggled for about an hour and a half, but the next day, after dying 102 times, she got her in about 20 minutes.
Whoa! Dead? Dude, my frames are dropping.
Onto Point Crow, who is level 156 with 3 blessings and using the Bloodhound's Fang and Morgoth's Cursed Sword. Quick reminder that just like Lyric, Point Crow is playing in New Game Plus, so the boss is a little bit harder for him than for other people. About half an hour into fighting Rellana, he got pretty optimistic.
Oh, that was so good. Wow, it's literally any moment.
It took him more than 3 hours after that. Just like Kai before him, he managed to get into phase 2 quite a lot, but often died to the transition move. And because he was relying a lot on jump attacks, the side slash got him often. He died 104 times, but you can see from his graph that he steadily improved until he got the one good attempt he was waiting for.
Yes! I locked in! Woo!
Now for top 3 worst performers out of the 15. We've got Koseki Bijou, who died the most to the line. Kadril, who you might have noticed hasn't appeared even though he did really well last time. And finally, the reason the video took so long to make, Fosun. Let's start with Bijou. She was level 141 with 3 blessings and using Moonveil. After about 3 hours of fighting, she realized what she was doing wrong though.
I just gotta be really good at not dying.
It still took her a while after that, but honestly, she had a lot going against her. Her damage was mostly magic damage, and Rellana is quite resistant to it, so she wasn't dealing huge chunks of damage like some of the other streamers before her. She was also still using her Scorpion Charm, so all of the most damaging moves were basically just one-shotting her. She only got to phase 2 about 20% of the time, but by that point, she had pretty much mastered phase 1, so it wasn't too troublesome. She died 131 times, which is almost the exact same as her deaths to the lion. However, right after a terrible fight in which she died super quick, she stayed motivated and finally beat the boss.
Yay! See? We did it!
Onto Kadril, who was actually weaker for Rellana than for the lion, as he fought her way earlier. He was level 141 with only 1 blessing, and wielding the Star-Scorched Greatswords. After hours and hours of fighting the boss, he discovered a new button on his controller.
Why did no one tell me I could do that?
Unfortunately, it wasn't that useful, as Rellana is too aggressive for him to be able to land the attack without getting punished. Kadril died a lot to the same attacks we've seen in the past, but he was taking significantly more damage than other people since he's the only one fighting the boss with only 1 blessing. He also seemed to have periods of times during which he managed to focus more than during others, and that reflects in his graph. He died 162 times, but surprisingly, like some others before him, he took a break, came back the next day, and beat her in only a few attempts.
That's me! That's me! That's me! You fucking bitch!
And finally, we have Forsen. Just a reminder in case you have not seen the previous video, but Forsen is level 109, the lowest out of anyone here. He had 2 blessings at the time of the fight and was using Morgoth's cursed sword. But the most important info here is that his flask is only +5. Oh, and after struggling for a few hours on the boss, he decided to re-equip his soul seal. That meant most attacks would just one-shot him. He was also hellbent on using his Ash of War all the time and greeding to stagger the boss, even when she wasn't even close to staggering. It took so long for him to make any kind of significant progress on the boss that Rellana decided to cheat and do this.
What? What?
Other than that, his graph is starting to get hard to read, as there are just way too many deaths at this point. He died 252 times, and only got to phase 2 in about 18% of fights. All we can do at this point is just admire his perseverance.
Oh my god! So easy for the god gamer! So easy!
So there you have it, the total amount of deaths to each attack. And I want to highlight a few moves. First is Rellana's Twin Moons. This attack feels absolutely perfect, in my opinion. It looks wonderful, only happens once or twice per fight, and it's quite easy to learn. Nobody died to this attack more than 3 times, even the streamers with the highest amount of deaths. There's also a bias that is important to highlight, and it's that some attacks are more common than others. Take the side slash combo, her most common move. It isn't particularly damaging, but is in the top 3 most common reasons for deaths, just because she does it so often. The 3-step cross slash and the stab double spin are a bit less common, but they deal way more damage, which means they also kill quite often. As for the streamers, here are all of their graphs side by side. I think in general Rellana is harder to master than the Lion, and we can see that people tend to be a bit less consistent in their progression this time around. Let's now update our leaderboard with the current death toll. And here you have it. The biggest drop is obviously Kadro, who went from 1st to 12th. As for the last spot, it was stolen from Bijou by Forsen. 1,118 deaths to Rellana. That's quite a lot, but we're not done yet. Yep, Mesmer is next, and we're gonna see how our leaderboard is gonna change after they fight him. If you wanna find out, be sure to subscribe, and see you next time.